It's a little interesting this week. It kind of goes all over the place. So we'll try to lock it in for you to take some notes. One of our dear friends, actually, Chad, it's funny that you referenced David Rice because he's also a part of Ignite DDS, and Tanya Sue, one of our great friends who's been on the show several times and continues to collaborate with us, did a story about this week, but I felt like we should bring it to our news channel as well. For our dear friends in Colorado who practice there, before too long, there is a law that's going to ban PFAs. PFAs are these like lifetime chemicals. They're different plastic components that you'll find in a lot of things that we use in our daily lives. They're great for waterproofing and for a lot of outdoor activities. They're also commonly found in dental floss. Well, guess what? In Colorado, after 2025, PFAs, dental floss containing PFAs, will no longer be allowed in the state of Colorado. So, our dear friends in Colorado who are practicing dentistry and hygiene, which they do allow autonomous practicing for hygiene in Colorado, you better check your products to make sure that your dental floss is either PFA free or that you move to a product that doesn't have it, because you will not be able to access those products into 2025. It will be an interesting transition, and I think it could set a precedence. You know, we watch these states and we watch activity that happens, and many times we'll see, like one of our other stories on dental loss ratio, you'll see one state become the tipping point, and then you'll see a lot of other states catch on. So it's certainly feasible that dental floss manufacturers will be watching this story closely, because if they haven't developed a PFA-free option, they might want to go ahead and get their research team trucking along and finding a replacement, because it wouldn't surprise me if more states adopt this policy soon. Another interesting development, the Supreme Court, I don't know if you follow them, but they have been very busy. And I have to say, non-politically, a very bipartisan effort on everyone's part. Many of the votes have been split in different directions. So it's always interesting to see how the courts are working. And at least they are working, which is more than we can say for a lot of our government entities. But why is this important for dentists? Well, there was an interesting ruling that happened last week that overturned or sort of overruled the Chevron rule. Well, what's the Chevron rule and why do I care? The Chevron rule, which was passed back in 1984, allowed the regulatory agencies a tremendous bandwidth to sort of interpret law and be their own experts to defend their interpretation of the law when creating regulations for all industries. So many of the things we do on a daily basis, all the regulatory things that dictate how we practice, all of the posters we have to hold up, all the OSHA requirements, all the HIPAA requirements, all the radiation requirements, if it's not state mandated, fall under the Chevron rule. And I heard a statistic, 18,000 cases since 1984 have gone in favor of regulatory agencies because of the Chevron precedent. What we're hoping from this overturn is maybe a little simmering down of the regulatory agencies, or at least a little bit more thought when they come up with changes that will directly impact dental practices and how they do their operations on a daily basis, and how it impacts the cost of doing business, how they take care of their patients, and how they take care of their team members, and ultimately their mental health and well-being while being dentists in their community. It can be quite overwhelming when you have a myriad of regulatory agencies always coming up with new things for you to take into consideration. And now it's become almost a full-time job in a practice just to keep up with the regulations that are required for dental practices to be compliant from every entity, including the FDA, the EPA, the CDC, OSHA, the list goes on and on. So this Supreme Court decision could be of some benefit to regulations that we're seeing in practice, and at least maybe slowing down their impact on the ground. One of the last stories we'll talk about actually is from one of the regulatory agencies. OSHA put out a rule, goes into effect July 19th of this month, mandating more clarity on the MSDS or SDS sheets now that come out with products. Many of the manufacturers would not disclose a lot of the chemicals that were housed within the products because of proprietary information or patent pendings and all these other things. And they didn't want their secret sauce to be released. OSHA has stepped in and said, that's not good enough. We have to have full disclosure of at least the products that are in. You don't have to tell us the recipe, but you have to tell us what's in there. And I will tell you on a personal perspective, I had a couple patients that were highly allergic profile patients that had a very specific laundry list of things that they were allergic to. And it was actually really difficult to get clarity from the manufacturers if it was safe for me to use some of the composite resins and some of the other things that we were using on patients because of proprietary recipes that were being used for those particular products. So, I just talked about how I want the agencies to slow down, but I can kind of see the validity in this so that we can continue to protect patients and at least get full disclosure on the products to be able to provide that information to patients. One last story, I had to tell it. There was an article that came out recently that was kind of interesting that found that 20% of periodontal residency programs are reusing their healing abutments. And that's kind of created this whole uh, scurry of infection control concerns because there's no actual real data on whether or not when you sterilize a healing abutment, if it's actually clean. And so look for more research to be launching pretty soon on whether or not implant parts and pieces can be reused on patients, like healing abutments, cover screws, scan bodies, etc., and if autoclaving will be sufficient enough to provide effective infection control. The other thing they found was that the infection control protocols varied greatly between the periodontal programs that were reusing those healing abutments. And so maybe just standardization of how we treat reusable parts in implant dentistry may be on the horizon. And with that, that's the news.